I do want to kind of preface this by saying that there are certain sections that are a little bit more slide heavy, and that's due to the fact that Monitor does kind of expose some sensitive information, and we're trying to be very cognizant of what we're showing on there. So that'd be some of the reasons why we're not using the user interface to kind of demo things out. But let's move on and take a look at what we're going to talk about today. So why ArcGIS Monitor? What is ArcGIS Monitor? Why do you need it? Unlocking its value for your GIS. So then we'll move under the hood. So breaking down the essentials. We'll look at the software you need to install to get started, including Monitor Server, the Monitor agents, and the database. And then we'll move down to metrics, components, collections, oh my. So the building blocks of your monitoring strategy. We'll look at key features and some terminology. Then over here, we'll be seeing the big picture. So that's that demo of analysis views, and we'll also touch on collections. And then staying ahead of our issues, so setting up alerts with email and webhooks. And then lastly, monitor in action. So we'll explore a couple ways that we've leveraged Monitor in our client's environment to make impactful changes. So Monitor is like the health tracker for your enterprise GIS. So kind of like how a fitness app gives you a snapshot of your steps, heart rate, and sleep patterns, Monitor does that for your GIS infrastructure. It shows you how things are running, highlights where improvements can be made, and helps you avoid problems before they become serious. Here's why that's so valuable. It brings everyone to the same table. Managers, so you can think of them as your big picture folks, they can easily check overall performance, uptime, and usage trends without needing a technical degree. For example, they might look at a dashboard or an analysis view showing the number of active users, the types of requests coming into the system, or how system performance is trending over time to help with budgeting or resource planning. On the other hand, administrators and IT folks, those on the front lines of solving issues, can dive into the specifics. So imagine getting an alert that an index issue is brewing in your portal. So with Monitor, you can catch and fix this before anyone notices that they can't log in or access a portal item. Instead of waiting for a user to report, hey, something's broken, you're already ahead of the game, keeping things running smoothly. At its core, ArcGIS Monitor turns complex systems into plain language that makes sense to everyone. Whether you're a manager planning your next budget or an admin troubleshooting slow map services, it bridges the gap so decisions can be made faster and more effectively. Let's break down the core parts of ArcGIS Monitor using an analogy. So think of the software components that make up your monitoring solution like the components of a smart home. Each part, from the sensors to the central hub, works together to ensure everything runs smoothly and stays connected. First up, we have the Monitor Server, which is like your smart home's control hub. It's the central brain of the system where all the action happens. Just like a smart home hub manages your lights and your thermostat and security system, the Monitor Server takes care of analyzing all the data coming from your GIS environment, managing settings, and giving you that big picture view of how everything is performing. It's where you set up your monitoring, configure alerts, and dive deep into system metrics to stay on top of any issues. Next, we have the monitor agents, which act like the smart sensors in your home. Imagine sensors that monitor temperature, motion, and humidity. Each sensor gathers that valuable information. So similarly, the monitor agent that you install on the host collect data from every system or component in your GIS environment. Whether it's tracking the health of your servers, databases, or services, the agent's job is to gather that data and send it back to the monitor server for analysis. So where does that all go? It gets stored in the Postgres database, which is in our analogy is like cloud storage in your smart home. This is where your system performance data lives. The database acts like the secure repository, keeping all that collected information safe and accessible for reporting and analysis. You can think of it like a giant vault that holds everything you need to keep tabs on your GIS environment's health, performance, and history over time. And finally, to make sure everything works, you need your access key, and that's your monitor license file. It unlocks all the features you need. Without it, none of your smart devices, or in this case, your GIS monitoring tools would work. Now that you've installed ArcGIS Monitor Server, you've licensed the software, installed Postgres, and deployed the agents, the next step is setting everything up. And this includes creating the admin account, connecting to the database, and registering the agents. It's worth noting that in version 2024, agents play an even bigger role than before. Unlike in 2023, where the agents were only needed on servers located in different networks, they must now be installed on every host that you plan to monitor. Also, these setup steps, creating the admin account, the database connection, and the agent registration, are now done via the command line. The admin account and database registrations are handled on the machine where monitor server is installed, while the agent registration takes place on the host running the agents. With a new version of ArcGIS Monitor on the horizon, this process might evolve, but for now, this is how it's done in the current version. Now that we've walked through getting ArcGIS Monitor installed and set up, it's time to shift focus to the key terms and concepts that you'll use to start monitoring your environment. Let's start out with the components. So components are essentially the building blocks of your GIS system, whether that's software or hardware. For example, it could be an ArcGIS server, a web service, or even a database. Each of these components has specific performance data and metrics that Monitor keeps track of. By registering them, you can easily monitor their health and usage. So first, we start by registering our components. We select an agent, choose a component type, give the component a name, and optionally provide a description and a label. Lastly, we provide a username and password. Once the components have been registered, ArcGIS Monitor can start collecting metrics. So metrics are the key numbers that give you insights into how your system is performing, things like CPU usage, memory consumption, or response time. These metrics provide a snapshot of your system's health by keeping an eye on them. You can spot trends and catch potential issues before they affect your users. Out of the box, ArcGIS Monitor provides default thresholds and aggregation settings for many metrics. For example, some metrics might come with preset alert rules, where a green check indicates everything is running smoothly, a red X signals a critical issue, and a gray bell means that alerts are turned off. These default settings are a good starting point, but they may not always match your specific network setup. One thing to keep in mind is that every network is unique, and I've seen instances where brief network blips cause ArcGIS server or portal for ArcGIS to go into alert mode, even when the issue was likely just a temporary communication hiccup between the monitor and the agent. To avoid false positives, I've made a tweak by changing the sample size to 3 and using the 95th percentile aggregation. This means that instead of triggering an alert, if the average of 3 samples dips below the threshold, it will only alert if the 95th percentile of those samples is below the threshold. This approach helps ensure that you're catching true issues while filtering out temporary disruptions. With this flexibility, you can easily adjust the alert rules to fit your environment, ensuring that you get the right notifications at the right time. Whether it's tweaking the sample size, changing the aggregation type, or turning metrics on or off, you can fine-tune things to match up to your unique setup and avoid unnecessary alerts. So when we talk about tracking metrics, we need to talk about the observers, or as I like to call them, the silent watchers. Observers are the behind the scenes workers that collect data from your components. They monitor things like server performance and service responsiveness. Without observers, there'd be no metrics or alerts or performance insights to analyze. Some common observers are inventory, to scan and detect changes and collect attribute data; metrics, queries to collect metrics related to users and groups and licenses for portal; or machine availability and instance information for ArcGIS server; logs that collect software logs to track activity and diagnose issues; and health check status, queries that expose health check endpoints for portal for ArcGIS to assess the overall health and status of the installation. Collections are about staying organized. You can think of them like folders where you group related GIS components together. For example, you might have one collection for your production servers, another for your development environment, or even one for specific software types. This makes it super easy to focus on the data that matters most for each group and set up alerts and notifications just for them. Collections also help with managing things like service level agreements or scheduling maintenance tasks. Alerts are the primary way that you'll keep tabs on your system. Think of them like your personal notification system. Whenever something goes wrong, like if a service goes down or a system resource is running low, an alert is created to let you know. For example, if your ArcGIS server's disk space is running low, Monitor creates an alert so you can address the issue before it becomes a bigger problem. Data views are like custom data organizers that help you power your analysis views. They let you join tables like components, metrics, and metrics data to create exactly the data you need for visualizations. For example, you might combine component details with metrics to track performance trends, or use the alerts data view to create an indicator showing open issues. While Monitor includes several built-in system data views, if they don't meet your needs, you can create your own. Analysis is your tool for looking at the bigger picture. It lets you set up views to analyze and visualize the overall health, usage, and performance of your system, instead of solely focusing on individual alerts. So you can step back and identify trends and patterns across your GIS environment. However, it's important to approach this thoughtfully. Logs can sometimes lead you to chase red herrings. For example, CPU spikes might simply indicate your server is working as expected, not that it needs more resources. Similarly, a higher than default request rate doesn't necessarily mean you need to limit activity. While it's great to be proactive, let user experience guide your analysis. If users report slow services or repeated connectivity issues, that's your cue to dig deeper and find actionable insights. Notifications and incidents. So incidents in ArcGIS Monitor are like scheduled do not disturb periods for your GIS components during maintenance tasks. They let you temporarily pause monitoring and alerting for a specific collection or components to avoid false alarms or unnecessary notifications. For instance, if you're updating a server, you can set up an incident to assure that no alerts are triggered during the maintenance window. Notifications keep you informed about everything happening in your system, whether it's an alert about a low system resource or warning about an upcoming maintenance window or a reminder to check something. Notifications make sure that the right people are kept in the loop, and you can customize them to fit your needs and receive them via email or webhook. All right, so enough with the slides. Let's hop out of them and we'll move on over to ArcGIS Monitor. So we've covered some of the basics, so we're going to just dive into a few key components here in Monitor. As we navigate through the interface, just take note of how has a similar look and feel to Portal. This makes it easy to get comfortable with, especially if you're already familiar with Portal. And when we take a closer look at the analysis views, you'll notice a resemblance to Operations Dashboard, which is great because it means that you'll be able to build and customize views in a way that's hopefully intuitive and familiar. So this is the home screen right here, and this is built off of an analysis view. So when you first set this up, there is a sample analysis view, and that is the default home screen. So when you click into analysis, you do have the option, if we click on one of these, to set as the default system or to set it as your own home screen. In 2024, there are some more sample analysis that are created for you, which is really great. Before you just had the single sample analysis. So let's take a look at what's created kind of out of the box for you. So we can take a look at this one. And there's a lot going on here. So we have an overview, ArcGIS server, we have some requests received and response times. And we can also collapse these. So we have these headers that we can collapse if we want to drill down. We'll take a look at one of the other ones. So if we look at sample infrastructure, so this also does open connectivity alerts. We have storage capacity. We can scroll down. We have network activity, ArcSoc instances. I've created my own. So I have some things that I like to see right off the bat when I come in. We monitor, we have lots of managed service clients that we monitor. And when I'm trying to troubleshoot, I like to see a few key things. So this is one that I set up. I do love to see this open alerts. This is very helpful for me. I like to see CPU and memory utilized. I do like to keep this network in and network out in there. Again, this is our demo environment, so not a lot's happening in here. So we've got federation alerts within the last 2 days. This is one for production, one for staging. That's because I kept shutting it off and on, not because I'm terrible at managing our portal. We have ArcSoc processes. Again, not a whole lot happening here for production and staging. And then our requests received, average response times, instances used and instance saturation. So these right here can tell you a lot. And then you have the ability to kind of switch that out. You can really drill down. You can see what's happened in the last 15 minutes if you want to be real specific, or if you want to start to aggregate, you can pull that time frame out. I do want to note, because this was something that I was a little bit confused at, is that when I initially, if we take a look at this, I initially pulled this out to 24 hours and notice that this gets very condensed. If you do go ahead and open it in full screen, you'll get more of a realistic representation. So just kind of keep that in mind if you switch it out later, that it seems like it scales it down, but that's only because of the compression there. So let's head back out. I did want to touch back on the data views because this is something new in 2024 that I really appreciate. So there's a bunch of out of the box ones. So before you had to create your own data views. And so there's ones that are already created for you that you can just reuse. And so one of the most common ones that you're going to use is this components and metrics data. So if we click into it, we can just see how have our components, we joined metrics, joined data. We can test that just to make sure we're going to get some results there. And we should. Yep, there we go. We have 2000. So, and then again, you can still create your own if you need to. So I created one for components and alerts. That's mine. You can see components, metrics, alerts right here. I did that to get the portal indexes. So let's just do a quick sample of creating an analysis view. So we're not going to do it. We're just going to do a single indicator. So we'll call this test 2. We'll open this up. Let's add a header. We'll click done, and let's add an indicator. Again, very similar to operations dashboard. So for this one, I'm just going to search for components. I'm just going to do a simple one that tells me how many server components I'm monitoring. And so this here, you can see with components, it gives you a sample data. You can check and make sure, see what fields you're going to get with that. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to go ahead and filter this. So in components, I am going to just type in type is equal to, I can scroll down here, ArcGIS server, and they do want to go down to status. Nope. Yeah. Nope. Where am I? There we go. Sorry, state is monitored. And then ID and count's good. We can add an indicator. And then similarly, we can, to ArcGIS dashboard, to operations dashboard, we can give it a title. We can click done. And now we have that. One of the nice things is that you can just go ahead and duplicate this. We'll duplicate it again. And then the only thing you have to do is go back in here and change it to, portal for ArcGIS. And then maybe we just want to change our indicator. And then we can do the same thing here. Maybe we want to just do our services. And then if we wanted to give that a different icon, and that's kind of simple demo on creating an analysis view. Let's head on over to collections. I just wanted to expand on this a little bit more. So I have added a collection of hosts over here. I also have a ArcGIS server components demo, but I wanted to go into hosts and just show you in the settings how you can enable a feature service. So that's kind of a unique feature of collections. So I enabled this feature service, and I have a feature service here that I was then able to add to Portal. And this is just a basic, nothing fancy dashboard, just to show kind of a proof of concept that you can bring these metrics into operations dashboard. If I go ahead and we'll just do this one, just show you what it looks like. So if we go ahead and hit change, so when you bring this in, you have all of these tables available to you. So this is kind of what it looks like on that end. This kind of opens things up. It can be a little bit clunky trying to get used to working with it in here, but I can only see this improving over time and opening up. It's nice to be able to design things how you want, order things around how you want. ArcGIS Monitor is great, but there's some limited functionality as far as the design capabilities of it. And similarly, we have our date up here where we can do last 30 minutes or we can do last 2 hours. So I wanted to point that functionality out. Let's go ahead and head over to administration. So I did want to talk about this really quick. So I don't know, some of you may have noticed that I have an external facing URL for Monitor. So that was kind of one of the things as I'm monitoring different people's, different clients' environments, that's very difficult when you get a link to then leave where you're at, go to your desktop, turn on a VPN, get on there. So that's kind of challenging. I have heard whispers. Don't quote me because I'm not sure if it's true, but it sounds like ArcGIS Monitor may have a web adapter coming that's going to make this a lot easier. But I kind of did what a web adapter does here. So we're in AWS. I have a load balancer. On my load balancer, I have a wildcard certificate, and I have thrown this into our DNS, monitor.cloudpointgeo.com. And then I'm going to pull up an IIS. I have done, let me make this a little bit bigger for everyone to see. I have done a URL rewrite. So you do have to install the URL module in here, and created a virtual directory, ArcGIS. And then this is forwarding those requests into ArcGIS Monitor. And then here I set my web context URL. So I was getting bad gateway, which was kind of a frustrating little problem, but with AWS, with our certificate being managed in AWS, we don't have the ability to export it out. So it just sits on the load balancer. I couldn't import it into IIS, so we're using a self-signed certificate, and Monitor did not trust that self-signed certificate. So I did have to export that out and import that into the settings. I wanted to stop over here and email. So in order to get email notifications, you do need to hook up an SMTP server. So you're going to want to get that. If you want emails, you need to get those credentials and get that set up in there as well. So let's head over to notifications. So there's two different ways you can create a notification. If we click on this, we see that we can create a collection notification or a custom notification. So I do want to note that when you create a collection, so if you added, server and portal and all your components to a single collection, it is going to pick up on all the metrics that are being monitored for that. So that there can be quite a few. So you are going any metric that's turned on and is alerting is if one of those goes into the critical or warning, it's going to send you an alert. And some folks they don't want to see the warnings. They just want to see the critical alerts. So what you can do if you want to do that, you can create a custom notification. So in this instance, this one is we'll scroll down a little bit further here to the events. This is just pulling from the metrics. So I just wanted to see one server's metric, and I have just found the metric ID, placed that in there. And then for myself, because I mentioned earlier, I was getting those kind of brief connectivity blips. We were getting kind of email spam. And what I was noticing is, so now I mentioned how I kind of curbed that, but also when I was just doing critical, and then I wasn't getting anything to tell me that it was back nominal again. So if it was just going to be a blip, I don't necessarily need to go all the way into Monitor and fix it if I know that a minute later it's nominal. So I do have for myself included both nominal and critical, and you want to make sure to check this box, require change. So we'll go ahead and cancel that. And then I will go back and show you how we can do. So we are doing the custom notification here in order to do this on a collection and not also get the warning. We do that by having a little bit of a different resource type. So instead of metrics, we're going to do collection, and we're going to select updated. Oops. over here. And then I just chose the name of the component or of the collection, and then same status is any of, and I just have critical and nominal notifying me there. So we talked about setting up emails. We talked about the custom notifications. I do really quick want to touch on webhooks. So right here, you can see that we have a webhook set up. I am going to show you really quick what that looks like in Slack. So we were using Slack to send that. We were using Power Automate. So this is just real basic proof of concept. You can see ArcGIS connectivity alert is issued at this time. I have a status and the number here. In the email, it does tell you 3 is critical. Working on that, but then I have a link here that I can click and open to the full alert. So I will really quick run down how we did. So what we did is we used a site called webhook.site. And so this part was a little bit hard for me to understand how we got that payload. So before we go into that, let me just show you Power Automate here. So the first step is when a request is received, HTTP. You do need a premium membership here for this Power Automate module. So they want this request body. And so I was very confused initially is how do I even get that request body? I don't know what to put in there. This generates itself once you save this. I had this anyone in my tenant for a while. That was the default. Didn't realize why I wasn't getting my alerts. It does have to be set to anyone for Monitor to be able to send those alerts, but I'll show you how we got that sample payload. So went over to this site and it gives you a unique webhook URL that you can use. So you copy that URL and then back in ArcGIS Monitor, you would then, this is blank, so you would then place that URL in there, and then I triggered my alert. When I triggered my alert, inside of here, it gave me a sample payload. So I then copied that sample payload, and here where it says use a sample payload, so I pasted the sample and then it generated the schema for me. And then under advanced options, I just have post. And then once I saved that, I got my webhook URL, that's then the URL that I placed inside for my notifications. And then here, just because we use Slack, I used the post message. There's been some cool, there's lots of stuff out there. There's been some cool stuff with Teams. This is just me getting this in here, just a real basic proof of concept here. And the last thing, I did have one thing that I wanted to mention. So we talked about those maintenance windows. So I did do some testing on a maintenance window, and this is what you see when the maintenance window is active. So you can see that was from my sample ArcGIS server component. It is paused. So during the duration of the maintenance window, it'll be paused. So I just wanted to show you what that looks like. And then last, we're just going to hit on a couple of scenarios, not using our stuff, but I'm just going to show you based on the different indicators we have here. So I had one client that when, we use ArcGIS Monitor, we check, things weekly to see how things are going. And we did notice really high memory utilization, right around 98%. And this was happening for days. We had restarted the server. It was back up there again. So we wanted to explore a little bit deeper. And I do hear a lot of times IT folks say, well, we don't really need ArcGIS Monitor because we have monitoring tools. We can monitor CPU and memory. We can monitor disk space. But what they can't do real well is monitor the GIS specific things like response time, instance saturation, and ArcSoc processes. So what we did is we noticed that we wanted to take a look deeper. So we looked down and we saw that the ArcSoc processes were up around 215. And Windows tends to have some issues with performance when we get our ArcSocs up that high. So we looked at that, but then we looked over to our requests received, and they weren't out of the ordinary. They were within the normal range, nothing crazy. But then what gave us our clue is that instances used and instance saturation, those were really low. So what that was telling us is that we had a lot of GIS services, non-hosted GIS services that were published. So just real quick, when we publish non-hosted GIS services, we have these things called instances. We can either have them part of a shared instance pool, or we can give them their own dedicated instances based on how popular those services are. So the standard is, one minimum, two max if we use default instances, and we can move those up and down. Usually we don't want to raise our max instances. We want to keep right in with that n+1 for max, where n is our number of cores on the server. But we can adjust that threshold. And each one of those ArcGIS processes just sitting there, that minimum, takes up memory, takes up resources on our server. The shared instance pool, however, those are for our more lightly utilized services. And then, they aren't taking up the resources. They just, when they need it, they go to that shared instance pool, grab their instance, and those instances are used for every time we pan and we zoom a map, we make a call to the map, we're using those instances. So what this was telling us is that we had a bunch of services that had dedicated instances that didn't need to be, because there wasn't a whole lot happening. So we were able to adjust that, clean things up, and we took our RAM from 98% down to 72%, which was a much more comfortable area. And we did this by cleaning things up. But if we didn't have that other bigger picture, what we would have done, the only thing we would have done if we just saw that memory was high over time, we might have checked a few things, but we might have just given that more resources. And that's not always what we need to do. So that's an example of kind of an actionable item that we took. Another instance, an example, and my last example here, is where we didn't do anything at all on the GIS side. I had another client, and this was the standard kind of out of the box default settings, and we were getting like a high request rate alert on the ArcGIS server and for a service in particular. And so we went to ArcGIS Monitor, and we could see the high request rate. And then the next thing we did is we wanted to look at the average response time, and it was really low. And especially for the service in question, it was responding great. So what that told us is that, yeah, there's a lot of requests for the server and for the service in particular, but it's handling it okay. So we don't need to do anything. The only thing we needed to do was to adjust our default rates for the alert, so we weren't getting alerted every time. And so that's just an example of how, you don't come in here right away and it's perfect and ready to go. There is some tweaking things, seeing how your system's working, and making improvements over time. But it has been a very valuable tool for us as we manage our clients' infrastructure. So that's all I have right now. I know I went through a lot of information really fast. This probably could have been stretched out, but I'm going to turn that over to Sahara.